Imagine meeting someone you think is just a random stranger, only to realize later they hold your future in their hands. That's exactly what happens when Clint Eastwood steps in to teach a manager a lesson she'll never forget. The late afternoon sun glared through the towering glass walls of the Grand Haven Hotel, casting golden streaks across its gleaming marble floors. Nestled in the heart of Austin, Texas, the hotel was known for its modern elegance and high-end clientele, a place where appearances mattered and luxury was expected. Behind the polished counters, uniformed staff moved briskly, their smiles practiced but strained under the sharp eye of Danielle Brooks, the hotel's general manager. At 38, Danielle was a woman with a mission, her heels clicking authoritatively as she strode across the vast lobby, her eyes scanning every inch of the space for imperfections. A perfectly arranged flower vase, a guest waiting too long for service, a staff member daring to linger, nothing escaped her watchful gaze. To her, maintaining the hotel's image wasn't just about pride, it was survival. The Grand Haven had been struggling with declining revenue and poor reviews when Danielle took over, and she was determined to drag it back to the top, even if it meant ruling with an iron fist. Staff whispered when she passed, their voices hushed with a mixture of respect and fear. Danielle had a reputation, sharp, cold, and uncompromising, and though the lobby looked pristine and guests were being served, there was an undeniable tension in the air, one born not of excellence but of exhaustion and worry. For Danielle, this was the cost of success. Danielle Brooks was a woman who thrived on control. To her, running the Grand Haven Hotel wasn't just a job, it was a battlefield, and she was determined to win. Every morning she arrived sharply at 7 a.m., her tailored suits immaculate, her clipboard always in hand. Nothing was left to chance under her watch. She had earned her reputation as the hotel's fixer, sent in by corporate to clean up messes left behind by previous managers, and if that meant running a tight ship, so be it. Danielle believed that every employee was an extension of her reputation, and she made sure they knew it. Her meetings were short, clipped, and heavy with expectations. No excuses, only results. Staff turnover was high, but Danielle told herself that was simply the price of excellence. To her, there was no room for leniency. Every interaction was measured, every gesture calculated. Even with guests, her warmth was polished and professional, but never genuine. Beneath the surface, Danielle was driven by fear. Fear of failure, fear of the corporate board that had given her one last chance to prove herself, and fear that if she didn't turn this hotel around, her career would be over. She watched her staff like a hawk, never tolerating mistakes. If a bellhop let a guest wait too long, they were reprimanded. If housekeeping missed a speck of dust, they were written up. Danielle's philosophy was simple: perfection or nothing. Yet, behind her back, employees whispered, calling her the Ice Queen, a woman so obsessed with order that she had lost sight of the people behind the uniforms. But for Danielle, the stakes were too high to care. Or at least, that's what she told herself. Until the day Clint Eastwood walked through her door. It was just past noon when Danielle first noticed him. An older man dressed in worn jeans, a faded leather jacket, and a well-loved hat that shaded his weathered face. He stood by the grand entrance of the Grand Haven, glancing slowly around the lobby, his hands tucked casually into his pockets. To Danielle, he looked out of place amidst the polished marble floors and towering floral arrangements. Her eyes narrowed as she observed him from behind the front desk, where she had been finalizing staff schedules. He lingered a bit too long near the concierge, brows furrowed as if lost in thought, and Danielle's mind went straight to one conclusion: another drifter who had wandered in off the street, trying to escape the midday heat or looking to take advantage of the hotel's luxury amenities without paying. She set down her clipboard sharply and adjusted her blazer, her heels clicking with purpose as she approached him. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her tone polite but firm, that carefully measured voice she used to dismiss without causing a scene. "Can I help you with something? This lobby is for registered guests only." The man turned slowly to face her, meeting her gaze with a calm, steady look that caught her slightly off guard. There was no embarrassment or confusion, just a quiet confidence that didn't match his rugged appearance. "Just looking around," he said simply, offering a faint smile. Danielle's jaw tightened. "I'm afraid we can't have people wandering around without a reservation," she replied sharply. "If you're not a guest, I'll need to ask you to leave." The man gave her a long, unreadable look before tipping his head slightly. "Fair enough," he said, and with that he turned and strolled out, leaving Danielle feeling oddly unsettled, though she quickly brushed it off. After the man left, Danielle returned to her office, feeling a sense of accomplishment as she closed the door behind her. She smoothed her blazer, glancing at her reflection in the glass window that overlooked the lobby. To her, handling disruptions like that was just part of maintaining the Grand Haven's pristine reputation. With a satisfied sigh, she sat at her desk, diving back into the endless paperwork, scheduling shifts, revising staff protocols, and double-checking the profit margins from last quarter. Danielle prided herself on being sharp, efficient, and in total control. If the Grand Haven was going to stay at the top of the city's elite hotel scene, she was the one to keep it there. She even recounted the interaction with Clint, though she didn't know his name yet, as a minor victory when chatting with her assistant later that afternoon. "Can't let people think this place is a public park," she had said with a smirk. But as the sun set and the lobby quieted for the night, a lingering feeling of unease crept in. Something about the way the man had looked at her, calm, unfazed, stuck in her mind. She shook it off. He was probably nobody, she told herself. By morning, Danielle was back to her usual self, briskly walking through the lobby with a clipboard in hand, issuing sharp instructions to staff, unaware that the man she had dismissed would soon walk through those same doors again, this time with the power to upend everything. The next morning, the Grand Haven buzzed with its usual polished rhythm. Bellhop scurried to assist arriving guests, the front desk staff greeted visitors with rehearsed charm, and Danielle made her way through the marble lobby, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp as ever. But, as she rounded the corner near the grand entrance, a sudden shift in atmosphere caught her attention. Several staff members stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the doorway. Danielle followed their gaze, and her heart gave a jolt. There he was, the same man from yesterday, the one she had confidently dismissed as a loiterer, but this time he wasn't alone. Flanking him were two impeccably dressed executives, one woman in a sleek navy suit holding a tablet, and a sharply dressed man with an authoritative air. The trio walked in with quiet but undeniable presence, as if they owned the place. Clint's calm gaze swept over the lobby, taking in every detail, and when his eyes landed on Danielle, a faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Danielle's throat tightened. Something was very wrong. Squaring her shoulders, she approached them with her best professional smile, masking the unease growing in her chest. "Good morning," she said, her voice cool but polite. "Can I help you?" The woman in the navy suit stepped forward, returning a clipped smile. "We're here for an internal review. Mr. Eastwood will explain." Danielle blinked, her heart sinking as she turned her gaze back to Clint. Eastwood? Clint Eastwood. The name clicked, like a punch to the gut, and as realization dawned, her usual confidence faltered. This wasn't some drifter, this was the owner, and Danielle had thrown him off the property without a second thought. Clint Eastwood stood silently for a moment, letting the weight of the situation settle over the room. His calm, steady gaze never left Danielle, who now stood rigid, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, trying to maintain what little composure she had left. Finally, Clint spoke. "You know," he began, glancing around at the gathered staff, "I've been in a lot of places, seen a lot of people running businesses. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that how you treat people when you think no one's watching says more about you and your leadership than any sales report ever could." Clint turned his gaze back to Danielle. "Yesterday, you didn't see a man who deserved respect. You saw someone who didn't fit your idea of what belongs in this hotel. You made a decision, one based not on who I am, but on what you assumed I wasn't." Danielle swallowed hard, her cheeks burning. Clint took a slow step forward. "Let me make something clear. This hotel isn't just about polished marble floors and expensive rooms. It's about people. Every guest that walks through these doors deserves respect, whether they show up in a suit or a pair of dusty boots. And so does every employee who works here. His gaze softened slightly, but his words still carried weight. Leadership isn't about barking orders and keeping up appearances. It's about setting the tone, creating a place where people feel valued, not judged. Danielle's throat tightened as she realized for the first time just how far she'd strayed from that ideal. Danielle's throat was dry, but she forced herself to speak, her voice wavering as she tried to salvage her pride. "Mr. Eastwood, I was only doing what I thought was best for the hotel," she said, her hands fidgeting slightly. "We've had trouble before with people loitering around the lobby, and I just wanted to protect our image. I didn't mean any disrespect." But as soon as the words left her lips, she realized how weak they sounded. Clint's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in disappointment. "You didn't mean disrespect?" he repeated quietly, almost to himself, before looking her squarely in the eyes. "Danielle, respect isn't something you give when it's convenient. It's something you give because it's right." His tone was firm now, every word like a hammer striking the point home. "What you did yesterday wasn't about protecting this hotel's image. It was about making a snap judgment. And if you think that kind of leadership builds loyalty, trust, or even good business, then you're in the wrong job." Danielle's defenses crumbled further under his steady gaze. Clint let the silence stretch for a moment before adding, "You've got one chance to fix this. One, because I don't invest in places that forget the human side of what they do. And if you can't show respect to everyone who walks in here, from guest to staff to stranger, then you don't belong at the helm of this hotel." Danielle could only nod, the reality of her situation finally settling in. After Clint's words sank in, Danielle retreated to her office, closing the door softly behind her. The sharp, no-nonsense manager everyone had known was now visibly shaken. She sat at her desk, staring out the window at the busy street beyond, replaying the entire encounter in her mind. For the first time, she saw herself through Clint's eyes, a leader so focused on control that she had forgotten the basic human decency that should come with the role. The realization stung. Her actions, meant to protect the hotel's image, had only revealed her own flaws. She had judged Clint on appearance alone, and that mistake had exposed a deeper issue in how she treated people, including her own staff. Taking a deep breath, Danielle opened her notebook, writing out the words "respect is non-negotiable" at the top of a clean page. She began listing small but concrete steps to change her approach, meeting with each employee one-on-one, creating an open-door policy for concerns and offering proper training on customer relations, starting with herself. No more harsh reprimands over small mistakes. No more cold dismissals of guests who didn't look the part. As she looked over her list, a quiet determination settled over her. Clint had given her a warning and a chance. She wasn't going to waste it. This wasn't just about saving her job now. It was about becoming the kind of leader who earned respect, not demanded it. The next morning, Danielle gathered her entire staff in the hotel's small but elegant conference room. The air was thick with anticipation. Many employees had heard about Clint Eastwood's visit and the scene that had unfolded. Some glanced nervously at each other, unsure of what to expect from the woman who had ruled with an iron fist for months. Danielle stood at the front, her usual sharp expression softer, her eyes reflecting a mix of humility and determination. She took a deep breath before speaking. "I owe all of you an apology," she began, her voice steady but sincere. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. "I'd been managing this place with the wrong mindset. I'd been focused on rules, image, and control, but in doing that I forgot about respect, both for you and for our guests." Her eyes swept across the room, meeting the gaze of employees she had previously reprimanded without a second thought. "Yesterday, Clint Eastwood reminded me of something important. This hotel isn't just about appearance, it's about people, and I haven't treated you the way you deserve." A moment of silence followed before she continued. "Starting today, I'm changing that. I want to hear from you, learn what's been wrong, and work together to make this place better, for everyone." For the first time in a long while, Danielle let her guard down, and the staff could see it. Some nodded cautiously, others exchanged glances, but hope flickered in their eyes. In the days that followed, Danielle made good on her word, beginning with small but meaningful changes that didn't go unnoticed. She started greeting every staff member by name when she arrived in the morning, something she had never bothered to do before. Rather than issuing curt orders, she began asking questions, genuinely listening to their suggestions on how to improve daily operations. Danielle even made time to sit with the housekeeping team during breaks, something that had once seemed beneath her. Slowly, the icy atmosphere that had dominated the hotel lobby and back offices began to thaw. Guests noticed the difference too. Employees were more relaxed, more willing to smile and engage. But Danielle's real test came one afternoon when an elderly woman entered the lobby, her clothes modest and worn, her suitcase scuffed with age. The younger version of Danielle would have dismissed her as someone who didn't belong. But this time Danielle approached with a warm smile, offering assistance before the woman even asked. As she helped her settle in, Danielle spotted Clint Eastwood watching quietly from a corner of the lobby, arms folded, an unreadable expression on his face. She realized instantly this was no coincidence. This was her chance to prove that her change was real, not just for show. Meeting Clint's gaze, Danielle gave a polite nod before returning her full attention to the guest, determined to pass the test she knew he had set for her. Danielle took a deep breath, pushing aside the lingering nerves, as she turned her full focus to the elderly woman seated in the lobby. The woman looked tired, her hands slightly trembling as she tried to unzip her worn suitcase. Without hesitation, Danielle knelt beside her, gently placing a hand on her arm. "Let me help you with that," she offered softly, her voice warm and genuine. The woman looked up, surprised by the kindness, and nodded with a grateful smile. As Danielle helped unzip the bag, she struck up a gentle conversation, asking the woman about her travels, where she was coming from, and how long she planned to stay. There was no hint of impatience, no glance at the clock, and no sign that Danielle was thinking about the next guest or the next problem. For the first time in a long while, she was simply present, listening, caring. The woman explained she was in town to visit her granddaughter but had trouble finding a hotel that would treat her kindly on a limited budget. Danielle listened carefully, then smiled. "You're in good hands now." She walked to the front desk, personally checking availability, and offered a discounted room, something she never would have considered before. As she handed over the keycard, Danielle added, "If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask for me." Across the room, Clint Eastwood leaned against the wall, watching the entire interaction unfold. When Danielle glanced up and met his gaze, Clint gave a small, approving nod, his eyes reflecting quiet satisfaction. Danielle smiled to herself, knowing she had just passed a test, not for Clint, but for herself, and what kind of leader she wanted to be. Later that afternoon, as the hotel lobby settled into a quiet lull, Clint Eastwood approached Danielle near the front desk. She straightened instinctively, but this time it wasn't from fear, it was respect, and maybe a little pride in how far she'd come. Clint leaned casually against the counter, his sharp eyes softening just slightly as he studied her. "I saw what you did earlier." Danielle gave a small nod, her hands folded neatly in front of her. "I'm trying," she said quietly. Clint chuckled, that familiar glimmer of amusement in his eyes. "Trying's a good start," he agreed. He paused for a moment before continuing. "You know, Danielle, leadership isn't about who speaks the loudest or runs the tightest ship. It's about the people, how you make them feel when they walk through that door, whether they're here to spend a fortune or just need a little kindness." His gaze locked on hers, steady and clear. "What you did for that woman, that's the kind of leadership that leaves a mark." Danielle swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle deeply in her chest. "Thank you," she said earnestly. Clint straightened, a small but approving smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Just keep at it," he said, turning to leave. "I'll be watching." As he walked out the door, Danielle felt a quiet resolve growing inside her, a reminder that respect and kindness weren't just good business, but the heart of true leadership. As Clint's figure disappeared through the glass doors, Danielle stood still for a moment, absorbing everything that had transpired. The woman who had once believed that strict control and sharpness were signs of good leadership now understood something much deeper, that true leadership came from empathy, humility, and respect. She glanced around the lobby, noticing for the first time how her staff moved with more ease, how guests smiled more genuinely. Small but significant signs of change. Danielle took a deep breath, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. She had started this journey determined to fix the hotel through force and strict rules, but what really needed fixing had been her approach all along. As she returned to her office, she made a mental note to keep listening, to keep supporting her staff, rather than managing through fear. Danielle knew there would still be hard days ahead, but now she felt equipped to handle them. Not with cold authority, but with understanding. Looking out the window at the bright afternoon sun, she allowed herself a small, proud smile. Clint had offered her a second chance, and this time she was ready to lead in a way that truly mattered. The story of Danielle and Clint Eastwood teaches a powerful lesson about leadership, respect, and humility. Danielle entered her role believing that strict rules and harsh management were the key to turning around a struggling hotel. She saw guests and employees through a narrow lens, focusing on efficiency and control, rather than kindness and human connection. Her encounter with Clint, whom she mistook for a drifter but later learned was the new owner, forced her to confront the flaws in her approach. Clint's quiet but firm lesson reminded her that leadership isn't about barking orders or intimidating staff. It's about earning trust, showing respect, and creating an environment where people feel valued. Danielle learned that success isn't just measured by profits or procedures, but by the way people are treated. Through reflection and genuine effort to change, she transformed not only her leadership style, but also the entire atmosphere of the hotel. Her journey reminds us that treating everyone with dignity, regardless of their appearance or role, can profoundly impact a business and its people. True leadership comes from empathy and respect, and that is what builds lasting success and loyalty.